Ladies and gentlemen, welcome on back. In this one today, we're going to compare Mob of the Dead with Blood of the Dead and find out which map is the best. The way this video is going to work is that we will give 5 criteria on what makes a good zombies map, and each map will be given a score 1 out of 10 for each criteria. In the end, whichever map has the most score wins overall. It'll make more sense once we actually get into the video. The criteria is going to be the map layout, mini bosses, weapons, high rounds, and Easter eggs. If you guys are new to the channel, don't forget to leave a like. And with all that out of the way with, let's get right into it. Moving into our first criteria, we have map layout. Blood of the Dead has a decent map layout in comparison to other zombies maps with a few flaws. The gondola is quite literally a death trap since all of the zombies spawn instantly at the top whenever you use it. Not only that, but the map is also a lot larger than Mob of the Dead, so it does take a bit longer to travel from one end of the map to the other without using any type of transportation device. Granted, Blood of the Dead does have a lot more methods of transportation than Mob of the Dead through the use of the underground tunnels. But the worst feature by far in terms of map layout for Blood of the Dead is the catwalk. If you know what you're doing and you prepare properly, it's not that hard to get through this area. But if you don't, it can prove to be really difficult, and most of the time, you will never go back through this area. I'm going to give Blood of the Dead a 6 out of 10 in terms of map layout. It's done decently well, and is better than most other maps in zombies, but because of small features like the catwalk and the broken gondola spawns, I can't give it a higher rating than a 6. With Mob of the Dead, on the other hand, you have yourself a very simple yet very effective map layout. The gondola isn't a death trap, and I find myself using it more often on this map in comparison to Blood of the Dead. You don't have the underground tunnels like you do on Blood of the Dead, but they aren't necessary since the map is a lot smaller and easier to navigate by foot. Mob of the Dead doesn't have the catwalk either, which makes the map a lot more new player friendly in comparison to Blood of the Dead. The only area on this map that is different in comparison to Blood is the Golden Gate Bridge. In terms of aesthetics, it's a really good area and is super iconic, but in terms of overall actual map layout, again, it's very simplistic, but works very well. I'm going to give Mob of the Dead an 8 out of 10 when it comes to map layout. It isn't the best of all time overall, but there isn't anything that I hate about the way that this map is set up. The only reason I can't give it any more points is because there aren't any specific areas that stand out a ton on this map, besides maybe the Golden Gate Bridge. And with the end of our first round, we have Mob of the Dead in the lead with a good start at 8 points. Blood of the Dead isn't too far behind with 6 points and could very well catch up. In terms of map layout, I do like Blood of the Dead, but I can't say it's better than Mob of the Dead because unlike Mob of the Dead, there are areas that I hate on this map. With our second criteria, we have weapons. Blood of the Dead and Mob of the Dead are very similar when it comes to weapons, but there are a few differences between these maps. Blood of the Dead has the Blundergat as the main wonder weapon, with 2 different upgrade paths that you can take. You can either make the Acid Gat or the Magma Gat, but 9 times out of 10, you're gonna pick up the Magma Gat. It does all the things that the Acid Gat can do, but much better, and I consider this wonder weapon one of the best in all of zombies. You also have the Hell's Retriever and the Ghost Shield, which are useful in their own ways. I'm going to give Blood of the Dead an 8 out of 10 when it comes to weapons. You have a good selection, but in terms of weapon balance, the map limits you to only using the Magma Gat every single game, regardless of what you're actually doing, whether it be going for high rounds or doing the Easter egg. Mob of the Dead, on the other hand, also has a good selection of weapons. You have a better version of the Acid Gat, but you don't have the Magma Gat. During this time, we also got a huge selection of new guns for Mob of the Dead like the Uzi, Death Machine, and AK-47, which are all not present on Blood of the Dead. The Hell's Retriever is also a lot better on this map since it deals infinite damage and is very consistent with retrieving drops whenever you throw it into a horde of zombies. For the time, the weapon selection on Mob of the Dead was great, but I don't think it was better than Blood of the Dead. I'm going to give Mob of the Dead a 7 out of 10, just below Blood of the Dead, and that's mainly because of the Magmagat and the Shield, which are two features that are very important on Blood and are incredibly effective for whatever you're trying to accomplish on that map. With the end of our second round, we have Mob of the Dead still in first place with 15 points, but Blood of the Dead is starting to catch up and is only 1 point behind with a total of 14 for having a better weapon selection overall in comparison to Mob of the Dead. Moving into our next criteria, we have mini bosses. This one will be pretty short since both maps don't have a very wide selection of mini bosses. Blood of the Dead has the Hellhounds and 3 different variants of Brutus. You have Mama Brutus, which is the map's final boss. You also have normal Brutus and then an electric variant that spawns past round 17. The Hellhounds used to be annoying at launch, but they patched them and now they're a lot more manageable. I'm gonna give Blood of the Dead a 7 out of 10 when it comes to the mini bosses. You have some solid and iconic picks like the base Brutus and the Hellhounds, but I don't find myself liking the Electric Brutus or the final boss fight version of Brutus. With Mob of the Dead, on the other hand, you don't have that much in terms of mini bosses. You only have Brutus on this map, and at the very end of the Easter egg, you also have the Weasel. If you want to count that as a boss, I personally wouldn't. But on this map, there isn't anything wrong with Brutus. I think he's one of the best in all of Zombies in terms of mini bosses. I would have loved if they added in Hellhounds on Mob of the Dead. They would have fit in really well with the atmosphere. Overall though, I'm going to give Mob of the Dead a 7 out of 10 as well. You have Brutus, which is a really good mini boss, but I wish there was more. Blood of the Dead somewhat takes an edge because that map also has Hellhounds, but then it gets knocked back a few points because of the other Brutus variants. And for that reason, I think it'd be fair to give both of these maps an equal rating in terms of mini bosses. And that is going to wrap up our third round. Placements are still the same since both maps received an equal amount of points. Mob of the Dead is still in the lead with a total score of 22 points, and Blood of the Dead is right on its tail with a total score of 21 points. Both maps, in my opinion, are fairly equal when it comes to the quality of the experience that the mini bosses provided. Moving into our fourth criteria, we have high rounds. Now, this one is a bit interesting because in terms of high rounds, these maps are polar opposites. Blood of the Dead has a lot of ways that you can get to high rounds on, like through the use of traps and super powerful weapons. You have the Magmagats and the Helion Salvo, which can both carry you to whatever round you want. Not only that, but since it's on Black Ops 4, you also have your specialist weapon and Wraithfire grenades. Getting high rounds on Blood of the Dead is very easy because of how much the map offers. I'm going to give Blood of the Dead an 8 out of 10 when it comes to high rounds, since it's really engaging and very easy for new players to get into. I can't give it a higher score, however, because it can get really boring really fast, and there are a lot of other maps in Zombies which overall have a better high round experience. With Mob of the Dead, on the other hand, the high round experience is not as easy in comparison to Blood of the Dead. You have to solely rely on traps and the Hell's Redeemer to get to higher rounds. This can be incredibly engaging for the hardcore player, but also slow and monotonous to the casual audience. The acid gap becomes useless in the later 30s, and the only reason you keep it around is to distract the zombies. The traps that you get to use on this map are not as good as the ones on Blood of the Dead either. The Hell's Redeemer is also a lot better on this map in comparison to Blood of the Dead because it's a lot more consistent, but it can only kill a few zombies at a time. I'm going to give Mob of the Dead a 6 out of 10 when it comes to high rounds. This map isn't hard to get high rounds on, but it takes forever because you don't have a lot of options when it comes to killing the zombies. You don't need to worry about downs, however, since you will always be provided with a free self-revive every round. Overall though, I just don't find high rounds on Mob of the Dead engaging since they just take way too long. And that is going to wrap up round 4. For our final scores, we have Blood of the Dead taking the lead with a total of 29 points for having great high round smoothness, but Mob of the Dead isn't too far behind with only one less point at a total of 28. High rounds on Mob of the Dead aren't a highlight to the map and can prove to be fairly boring for a good majority of players. Coming into our last criteria, we have the Easter egg. I can make a whole video going over the Easter egg on Blood of the Dead, but I'll try to keep it short. There are a lot of things that I do like about the Blood of the Dead Easter egg, and I've made a whole video on why I think it's incredibly underrated. I can't give it a high score, however, because it's not going to be accessible for the majority of zombie players. You have to be really skillful to get the Easter egg completed on this map. This Easter egg draws casual players away and can even be discouraging for some mediocre and hardcore players. However, just because a map is hard doesn't mean it's bad. And while I think the Easter egg is the worst part about Blood of the Dead, I'm going to be giving it a 5 out of 10 average. The cinematics on this map are phenomenal, and the story told is really solid. But there are a lot of things in this Easter egg that are hard to do just for the sake of being hard, like constantly having to rely on the shield. Other parts of the Easter egg are really underwhelming, like the final boss fight and the part where you have to break open a wall with a spoon. Overall though, I don't find Blood of the Dead to be as bad as people say it is. Mob of the Dead, on the other hand, has a very simple Easter egg, but appeals to every type of player. There isn't a single step on this map that I hate, and while it can be really repetitive at times, it's really engaging. The part where you have to fly to the Golden Gate Bridge multiple times is a good example of the repetitiveness, but it makes for a great story and an easy way for casuals to access Easter eggs. While the story on Blood of the Dead was good, Mob of the Dead has a story that is miles better in my opinion. It relates to events that happened in real life and adds certain aspects of the zombie storyline to it. It's told really well on this map through all the audio reels and is incorporated into the gameplay in a much better way than any other map in Zombies. I'm going to give Mob of the Dead an 8 out of 10 when it comes to the Easter egg. It appeals to all types of players and tells a story that is very intriguing. I do wish there were more steps for this Easter egg because it can be really boring and repetitive at times, but if you're a new player to the mode and you want to try and do an Easter egg, it's a great first map. And that is going to wrap up our 5th and final round. With our ending scores, we have Mob of the Dead in first place with a total of 36 points, but Blood of the Dead didn't fall too far behind and managed to get 34 points. I love both of these maps, but I have to give credit where credit is due. You just can't beat the original. Mob of the Dead is the best map for all types of players, and Blood is only good for the hardcore audience. Blood of the Dead is also much more inferior when it comes to the map layout and Easter egg, but what I will say is that the high rounds and weapons on Blood of the Dead are much better in comparison to Mob of the Dead. Both of these maps are great, but I have to give the win to Mob of the Dead for having a better overall experience in comparison to Blood of the Dead. Anyways guys, that's going to wrap up the video for today. If you did enjoy, leave a like, subscribe, do all that. So leave your comments down below if you want to see me do any other type of content. Check down the description as well for more zombie related videos. And yeah, I got nothing much else to say, so peace.